Well, hello, everybody, and hello, Gloria. We have the world's shortest time period to say the most important things. So I'm going to not waste any time, but start with thank you, Gloria, for joining us today. And Gloria is a Chicago girl. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your life before Chicago United?
Well, first, let me say thank you for having me today. This is just a wonderful event, and I'm so inspired by the video of the Pedrosas because it really, it is the story of Chicago. And my story is one of 3 generations of Chicagoans. So I grew up in the Lakeview area when it was all German and Irish, and we were the first Latino family that moved onto our block. A little bit of a shock for some of the folks who were living on that block at the time, but ultimately it was a very welcoming community. And I had great opportunities that came out of living in Chicago and going to a great public school. So I'm a big advocate for public education because it gave me every opportunity. I went on to study political science at University of California at Santa Barbara. And when I decided to come back to Chicago to go into advertising sales, people said to me, why are you going to leave Santa Barbara? It's beautiful here, the weather's wonderful, and the weather in Chicago is so terrible. And I said, you know, the people in Chicago are wonderful. And when I look back on my life, I don't want to say the weather was good.
Some people probably do, but
that doesn't seem to be as important to me as the people. So I went on to sell advertising space, joined a family business. My mother had started a business in 1972. We sold the business in 2002, and I found myself unemployed. But during the time that I was in advertising and running the family business, I was always active in advocacy. I joined Chicago Now. I joined the women's movement right out of high school and worked on credit policy. And then during my entire career, kind of in advertising and business, I was active in Women Employed. I was active with Mujeres Latinas en Acción, the Chicago Minority Business Development Council. I was spending as much time in advocacy as I was on business, which I don't know if it's a good thing, but that's what I was doing. So when Chicago United had the position open, somehow it just seemed to fit.
And so for somebody who has had social justice in your DNA, tell us a little bit about what led you to Chicago United and why you thought that was the right place and obviously still do.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I don't know that I ever thought about advocating for social justice. When I joined the women's movement, there were just things that needed to be changed, and so I was always the person who was putting my hand up to volunteer. And from the time I was really young, I mean, I remember Dr. King, even though I was really young, I remember Dr. King coming to Chicago. And I started reading books like Black Like Me. And I started just trying to understand other people's experiences. And so that was a big part of just, you're right, in my DNA. So when I had the conversation with Chicago United, what was clear to me was there was this great opportunity with an organization that had a phenomenal history to get refocused on the founding of the organization. The founding by a number of CEOs who understood that they didn't have to wait for government action to try to create equity, that they had the power to determine who they were going to hire, who they were going to contract with, how they were going to develop their board of directors. And I thought that was such a powerful platform, and that was for me, that was the impetus to join the organization, because it's the only organization that really holds CEOs in this city accountable for those 3 things: building a diversity on your board of directors, ensuring that your pipeline of talent is diverse, and that your contracting opportunities are diverse.
And so would you say that in the last 15 years, where's the needle moved in the efforts of businesses without government butt kicking?
Well, I will say that I'm not against government butt kicking,
No,
by the way. There's a lot that has been accomplished because of compliance, make no mistake. There's been movement, but I will say that the movement, in my opinion, is glacial. It's really slow. In 2008, in our corporate diversity profile, we partnered with the Federal Reserve Bank, and we asked them, when will we reach parity in senior level ranks in Chicago's corporations relative to the workforce? If we keep doing exactly what we're doing, when will we reach parity? And at that time, it was 89 years. That seemed like a really long time.
Until you compare it to
Right.
something longer.
And at that time, about 12% of the corporate directors on Chicago's top 50 corporations were people of color. We revisited that study in 2014, and so progress had been made. 64 years to parity, and about 14% of the directors are people of color. The challenge is that in that 64%, what moved the needle was Asian talent moving very quickly into executive ranks because of the concentration in IT. But we see that for Latinos and African Americans, it's a flat line. There is no point at which we will see parity if we keep doing exactly what we're doing, where we see parity in terms of workforce and executive level ranks. So we still have a lot of work to do. We've made progress, but there's a lot of work to do.
Well, I think that's really very significant, the statistics, when thinking about the fact that today is the anniversary of Martin Luther King's murder, and yesterday I think it was Equal Pay Day for women, or at least white women. Black women have to wait, and Latino women have to wait even longer. So it's unfortunate. Share with us when you first learned about Daniel Murphy Scholarship Fund, if you would, please.
At Chicago United, we're a small nonprofit. And so we're very careful about how we utilize our resources. And I had heard about the public interest program at University of Chicago, where you could hire a recent grad as a fellow, and they could be with you for a year. And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to get top talent and bring in, new ideas and new thoughts to the organization. So we opened up a fellowship position at Chicago United, and I was presented with 4 resumes. And one of the resumes just jumped out at me. This young woman was phenomenal. She had co-founded a magazine, and she was a leader on campus, and I just thought, this is great. So I brought her in and interviewed her, and I said, so tell me, how did you get from Pilsen to Exeter? I mean, this is not a, it's
not a normal leap.
Normal arc, yeah. And she told me about Daniel Murphy Scholarship Fund and how that changed her life and her trajectory. And she's here, Christian Sanchez.
Stand up for us.
Stand up, please. And Christian is paying it forward. She is now at University of Chicago as a program manager, helping other students build out their opportunities. So, it's a great thing to pay it forward.
Absolutely. And so knowing that we've got so many alums and scholars and families in this room, what advice would you give to our current scholars as well as future scholars about the workplace environments that they're likely to encounter, and give them some tips on how you think they could succeed?
So I think it's important that everybody realize that when you go into a workplace, it's just, a microcosm of our society. No matter how dedicated the leadership is to creating an inclusive environment. You know, you've got all of the dynamics that you come into anywhere else in the world. So the most important thing is accountability. Do what you say you're going to do, and be as open to sharing as you can possibly be. You don't know where the opportunities are going to come from, and you don't know how you're going to build reputation. You know, I can't tell you, there's no single path. But the one thing that does make a difference is if you show your talent, you show up, and you're accountable for what you do, that's the way that you can make your way through any organization, through any culture.
And so to build off of that, because I think that's really very valuable advice, what would you tell the business people in the room about what they could do to be more effective advocates for diversity and inclusion?
You know, you have to model it. You have to model it, and you have to model it every day. You really do. So, I mean, because when you think about lots of big organizations, you're working hard to build cultures of inclusion. But most organizations have various locations, and each location can have its own culture. Right. And so you can't control that, but what you can control is what you do and how you model inclusion. And so, for example, you know, and you can pick one thing. This year, I've chosen to think about how I open a meeting. So when I chair a meeting, I generally will send out a question in advance of the meeting so that everyone knows kind of what our key topic is, and I do a lightning round. Everybody at the table has to have a quick answer to that question so that their thought is on the table. And that allows everyone to have a voice as soon as they enter the meeting. Because what happens in many organizations is the strongest person's voice is heard first, right? Whether they're right or not. And then we miss the person who might be a little more shy, the person who might be newer, the person who might not feel like they are as valued. But if you start out with the intention of making sure that everyone's voice is heard, it changes the dynamic of the meeting. And so we can all choose, and that happens to be what I'm doing this year.
That's an excellent example. And so I told you that we had the world's most important topic in the world's shortest time. We did ask for some questions from the audience in advance. And so we have time for maybe one or two. But what can I say to a peer, a friend, a colleague, or a family member to create a sense of urgency around educational advocacy?
Well, I think we saw it in the video. Education changes not just one life. It changes the life of a family. It changes the life of a community. And what we see, we know that there is so much disparity in this city, economic disparity. And education, they're table stakes. You can't get any farther without it. And so if we are really going to create a city where everyone is benefiting from the economic vitality of this region, we've all got to be in on education first. That's table stakes. From there, we've got lots more work to do, but that's table stakes.
And for the organizations that are working with students with and employees with a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences, what could you recommend that they could learn from, opportunities and ways that they could best help our students in overcoming the challenges that they're inevitably going to face?
I think I'll just take this to a human to human level. Every one of us has been in a situation where we felt uncomfortable, where we felt like the outsider. And I would ask you to always go back to that place. Because if you can think about what that felt like, you can always reach out to somebody who's feeling like an outsider. It will help you recognize that moment that they need you to be the person that gives them a little bit of a hand, that gives them an extra welcome. Inclusion is not that hard of a concept. It's really not that hard of a concept. It really is about, if you think about what it takes to make sure somebody feels like they belong, that's what it takes. And it's what we have to do every day. And so in those complex situations, rather than tell you that there's a big structural thing that needs to be done, I would say that we can do it personally.
And I think that that's an enormously important point, because very often people feel that it's too overwhelming. I can't deal with it. There's nothing that I can do. And if we take it little bite by bite or little step by step, we can really make change. And so I'd like to thank Gloria for the time in this fast whirlwind. And so I'd like to thank all of you for your time today, and thank you. And I'd like to give Gloria the book that I wrote with my husband, Breaking Through Bias.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Appreciate it.